Welcome back to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Chris Torres, joined as always by my co-host, Mike Carter. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'd be doing a lot better if I could find a shortstop for my little league team. Working on that. But as I talked about with you off air, we're going to keep trying to put our best foot forward and work on some fundamentals, which are desperately needed by the Batavia Youth Baseball Major League Dodgers at this point. So we're working on it. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing good. I was just telling you, we got another round of sickness going through my house. So a little bit under the weather myself, but, comes with the territory with 2 kids under the age of 8. So, but doing okay otherwise. But let's get right
rough,
to
man.
it.
That's rough.
Yeah. It is what it is, man.
Your beard is on point still, though, no matter what. So.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how sick I am, man. The beard will always be on point. You could always count on that.
Fantastic.
But, listen, let's get right to it. We've got a fantastic episode. We've got 3 amazing guests, starting off with Mike Wilner, first-time guest to the podcast. He is a columnist at the Toronto Star, host of the Deep Left Field podcast, and you know him as well as the former radio play-by-play announcer of the Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to be talking all things Blue Jays with him. We also will be joined later by Chris Cotillo, talking Red Sox, and you know him, you love him, Craig Mish. He will be on after that to discuss all things Marlins. But first, let's bring in Mike Wilner, again, columnist for the Toronto Star. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we are very excited to have you on and to pick your brain here about what's going on in Toronto. It's been a little bit of a tumultuous season for the Blue Jays. They are right now in last place in the AL East, which, is right above 500, to be fair. The AL East has been that good this season. But overall, I'd say it's been a little bit disappointing of a year for this team, given the expectations going in. And several of their players have underperformed this season. And 3 players that I'm thinking of specifically are Alek Manoah, Alejandro Kirk, and maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, Dalton Varsho. So my first question to you, Mike, is which of these players do you think is most likely to turn things around and why?
Well, I think Manoah and Kirk are likely to turn things around just because the starts that they've gotten off to have been so far below expectations. Although, to be fair, I think that after the All-Star break last year, Kirk had something like a 630 OPS and 2 home runs. So I thought it was the workload of the early part of last season catching up to him. And I do think he's certainly better than this. I mean, the guy's got elite bat-to-ball skills. But I don't know if he's a 15 home run guy. Certainly not going to steal you any bases. But I mean, he should hit for a decent average at the very least.
Right.
Manoah, we've seen pitchers just have off years. And so far, everything has been wrong with Manoah. 2 starts ago, he had 7 walks, which was a career high. And even his last start against Baltimore was pretty good. He started off the first hitter 3-0 and had to battle back to get him out and got a couple of calls. Like he struck him out on the 5-0 pitch because he got a little bit of help from the umpire. But he was fine for the rest of the way. But he's got to get his slider back. And I think that's the biggest thing, the command and the slider. But he's been so good for so long everywhere he's ever been. This is the first time he's gotten any sort of pushback in the big league. And so it could take a little bit to come back from that. But I do think he'll come back. I think it's too far gone now for him to get any Cy Young votes this season or anything like that. But I do think the rest of the way he can be quite good. Varsho's hit 7 home runs already. So I expected him to hit close to 40 this year. but he's still on pace to hit close to 30. I think that there will be a run where he starts hitting really well for a little while, but I think he's an up and down guy. I mean, he's a guy who's not going to hit for a high average. He's going to walk. He's going to hit for power, and he's going to play incredible defense. And he's going to steal some bases, but I think he's doing what he's doing right now, and this isn't as good as he should be, but there will be sort of performance peaks throughout the season. But he'll probably wind up hitting about 240 with somewhere between 28 and 36 home runs.
That's pretty doable. I think most players would probably take that, even if they feel like it's maybe a little disappointing right now. I haven't felt that way too much about him. So, Mike, question I have for you, Bichette has been one of the bright spots on the Blue Jays, continuing to develop into one of the league's superstars. I drafted him very high this year, hoping for double-digit home runs and double-digit steals, which seemed like a foregone conclusion. But one thing that's been a little disappointing from a fantasy perspective has been his lack of steals. He's only got 1 steal so far in 4 attempts. What do you think is the reason for that? And would you count on him running more frequently the rest of the way?
I really don't know what like 2 years ago, I think in 2021, he had 25 stolen bases and was only caught once. But then last year, the number dropped and he was caught, I think, about half the time. And so he sort of throttled back this year. I'm not sure why he's not running as much. I don't think it's to give Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's been hitting behind him all year, a chance to drive him in from first. I mean, you are in scoring position at first base when Vlad's up. But I really don't know. And I haven't talked to him about stealing bases and success rates and all of that stuff. But I expected this year with the bigger bases and the disengagement rule for guys to be running wild. So I'm really surprised that Bo hasn't. But with Varsho stealing bases and with Merrifield stealing bases, it's not like this team isn't running. So hopefully, the weather heats up or his legs start feeling it and he starts taking off, because when he's doing it well, it's a big, big weapon of his.
Yeah, everything else looks great. I mean, it looks like he is taking that next step as really a superstar in this game. It is quite puzzling, though. I know from a fantasy perspective, people who took him in that first round were expecting 20 to 25 steals at a minimum. I thought there was a chance for even more given the new rules and how much it seemed that Toronto was going to be running just based on their spring training numbers. But it's definitely been puzzling. Especially like you said, he was so efficient a couple years ago, and now just 1 for 4. I wonder if that's just messing with his confidence a little bit or what. But definitely, hope to see more in that category moving forward. Another player, though this player was going much later in drafts, that fantasy players were very excited about, especially players who are in dynasty formats. That is Rickey Tiedemann. He is the Blue Jays' top prospect. He flashed in spring training. He looked fantastic, had a little bit of an injury towards the end of spring training. So, Mike, wanted to follow up with you to see where are things at with Tiedemann and what kind of timeline do you see for him to make it to the major leagues?
Well, he got hurt again in Double-A with a biceps tendonitis, I think. So he was shut down for a little bit. I'm not sure, honestly, whether he's back yet. I don't believe he is. But I think even had Tiedemann stayed healthy, the outside was going to be 15 relief innings in August and September this year. And maybe next year have a shot at something. But he only pitched 70 innings last year. And this year he's probably not going to get there at this point. And he's only 20 years old. So, I was saying all spring, you got to pump the brakes on Rickey Tiedemann, and he's a good guy to have in a dynasty situation because he looks like he's going to be very, very, very good. But you guys know as well as anybody, right, that there's really no such thing as a can't miss pitcher. But I don't expect Rickey Tiedemann to have an impact in the major leagues until 2025 at the earliest. aside from maybe a couple of starts here and there at the end of next season, depending on what his innings look like, or maybe they bring him in sort of like they did Aaron Sanchez 10 years ago, and he starts in the minors, has a few innings left, comes up. That's what I thought they were going to do this year had he not gotten hurt. Come up late in the season and work out of the bullpen, and then go back down to start next year, build up the innings, and then come back again. But I don't think we see Rickey Tiedemann make 10 starts in the major leagues between now and opening day 25.
Gotcha.
That's interesting. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you see anybody else currently in the minor leagues for the Blue Jays that could make an impact this season?
Not really. I mean, this team is so set, right? Yeah. It's not like there's a spot waiting for someone to come pick it up. I would have said Nate Pearson, but Nate Pearson's already up. When you look at AAA, you've got Ernie Clement, who is just killing it for Buffalo right now. But he's Ernie Clement, right? We've seen his act in the major leagues before, and I don't think he's going to be taking a starting job from anybody. There was talk about Addison Barger, who is a really interesting-looking kid, but he stubbed his toe pretty hard in April in AAA, and now he's hurt. And it's a potential for Yosver Zulueta, too. He's a hard-throwing right-hander who could come up and be a piece in the bullpen. But again, he's not going to be getting any saves. So I don't think there's a real big impact guy. This team is its major league team is its major league team.
Right. Yeah. I was prepping for this podcast, and I was looking at the team, and usually I want to try to kind of dig in and see where maybe there's some question marks, maybe some positions that might be in flux. And like you said, everything is set with this team. Like they have their starting 9, they have the rotation. I don't see a lot changing, like you said, throughout the course of the year. Just quickly on Nate Pearson, since you brought him up, I know you spoke with him recently on your podcast, Deep Left Field. What are your thoughts on him long term? I mean, is this his home now in the pen, or do you see him transitioning back to the rotation? No. Probably not this year, but at some point in the future.
I found it interesting that in that conversation with Pearson, which is the current episode of the podcast, everybody go look for it. He seemed to keep that door open to returning to being a starting pitcher. It's absolutely not going to happen. There is, I would say, I would love to say categorically 0 chance that he's ever a starter again, but obviously you don't close a door like that. But this is a guy who they tried real hard to make him a starter, and he just couldn't stay healthy.
Right.
A lot of it was fluke. He had that sports hernia in his first start in A-ball. He took a line drive right off the right elbow and broke it, and he was out for the rest of the season. But there have been shoulder things. He hasn't been able to be healthy or consistent as a starting pitcher, and he's a wipeout reliever. So this is his home. And I think eventually he's going to wind up being a really, really, really good setup man who will likely, if anything happens with Jordan Romano, get an opportunity to close.
Okay.
Makes a lot of sense. I think they finally hit the right role for him, it seems like.
Yeah, I do too.
Mike, Torres and I do a segment in our podcast, and something that you did really hit home for us, and wanted to have you talk a little bit about that and also answer this kind of question about mental health. I'm a special ed principal. Chris is a therapist by trade. Your pinned tweet is an episode of Deep Left Field where you had a mental health roundtable with several high performers in their field. It was exceptionally well done and really informative. What's one thing that you're doing for yourself that you do to maintain your mental or physical wellness?
Well, first of all, thank you for that. I'm really proud of that. We've had a couple of those episodes where I talk to like Olympic athletes and other professional athletes and stand-up comics and stuff, and talk to them about mental health, and specifically like stuff like anxiety and panic, which I've had issues with. And also shout out to the special ed. My mom was a special ed teacher for decades up here in Canada. So there you go. What I did, actually, I did it on Sunday. I turned off my Twitter mentions and just didn't look at them. And because it's just the nastiness and the negativity can be so overwhelming, especially when a team is going through what the Blue Jays are going through right now. I'm very, very liberal with the block button. And I feel like, I've always felt, because for the first, well, not for the first, but for 17 years, I was the pre and post game show host on the Blue Jays radio broadcast, as well as doing some play-by-play. So I sort of felt like a responsibility to the people that I was taking the phone calls from to be as interactive with them as possible, and be sort of that sounding board for them. But it resulted in a lot of crap that you have to put up with, because now that everybody has a voice, those voices are very often pretty terrible. And so I think that occasionally you really do need to step away. And I think that's been really good for my mental health. Another good thing for me is it's try to spend as much time with my kids as possible, who are growing up and moving out soon. So, I really do enjoy that, and get outside. Just get outside, exercise, even if it's just a walk around the block or something like that. It can really reset you and just keep you centered, because it's tough. And it's not just a grind for someone like me who's working every day for 8 months during the baseball season. It's a grind for everybody, in sports or out of sports. And it's really, really important not only to take care of your mental health. I don't know. I feel weird saying this if Chris is a therapist who knows all this stuff, but it's important to acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
That's a huge thing that a lot of people just don't do, that they feel like they got to be tough or whatever. It's important to acknowledge when you're having struggles. And we used to have this thing up here in Canada called Bell Let's Talk Day, which was a one-day thing put up by Bell Canada, and where they would talk about destigmatizing mental health issues and donate a nickel for every tweet with a hashtag. But last year they did it, and then 4 days later they fired hundreds of people and didn't offer them any. So it's gotten its own stigma. But on that Let's Talk Day, I started a tradition of opening up my direct messages on Twitter and just saying whatever you want to talk about, because sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger or someone you feel like who's in the public eye like me. Whatever you want to talk about, I will listen without judgment. And the advice I'm going to offer is talk to a professional, because that's what you need to do. And I've talked to like hundreds of people through that, and really helped both of us out, all of us out. So I think it's a hugely important thing.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think one of the things that's really cool about what you did is that it's really hard to kind of talk about ourselves in these situations, especially as men. We're expected to not talk about it. We're expected to eat it and just kind of keep moving on. So kudos to you for what you've done with it and using your platform for that, because very few people do. And so we applaud you for doing that, and we thank you for doing that, because it's extremely important. It's maybe the most important thing about our podcast is that we've had several people that have reached out to us on direct messaging asking for help or resources, and I'm really proud of that. So Mike, continue the great work. You're doing an amazing job, not only with what you do with the Blue Jays, but taking care of the mental health aspect of things for people as well. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate that a lot. You know what? It goes back to that thing we were talking about Springer, because he can say, hey, I know Matt Chapman is this good no matter what he's hitting, but I don't know if he can say that about himself. And we're often way more kind to other people than we are to ourselves in this. And we have solutions for other people when they have problems that we would never apply to ourselves. And we need to do that, right? We need to talk to ourselves the same way we talk to friends who need our help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll use that with clients sometimes. It's such a simple intervention, but it really gets people thinking. You know, I'll ask them, well, what would you tell your friend if they were in a similar situation? And it kind of like, you know, gets them thinking, and it gets them out of their own head and out of their own problem. And, you know, it usually becomes constructive. So, yeah, I mean, so much wisdom there, Mike. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for what you do. And we really appreciate you joining us today. I know you got to get out of here because you said one of the things you do to maintain your mental health is spend time with your kids. And I know you got to go do that. So we're going to let you go. But thank you again. And if you could just tell our listeners where they could find your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. And anytime, I'm happy to do this. And very, I appreciate the very, very kind words. So yeah, thank you. You can find me at the Toronto Star, which is thestar.com. Go click on one of my columns and then subscribe to the paper so they'll know that I sent you. You can find me on Twitter at Wilnerness, though I don't promise I'll respond, at least not now. And you can find the podcast at Deep Left Field wherever you get podcasts every Thursday afternoon. And it really is, during the season, we take you right into the dugout every week. The next show we've got has Jordan Romano and Danny Jansen together talking about stuff. And Nathan Lucas, who got his first big league hit last week, and the Orioles manager Brandon Hyde. So it's going to be a terrific show.
Yeah,
excellent.
It's a fantastic podcast. You get everybody. You get all the, you know. I know you had Kevin Gaussman on recently. So
yeah, talk about cinnamon buns. It was awesome.
Yep. So yeah, definitely go check out Deep Left Field. Thank you again, Mike. We are going to take a quick break. We will be back with Chris Cotillo of Mass Live.